The human ship drifted in space like a broken toy. Smoke leaked from its damaged hull while debris floated around it in slow circles. The small reconnaissance vessel had fought hard, but it was no match for the Zephyrian Empire's war fleet. Elena Volkov pressed her back against the twisted metal wall and checked her rifle. Only 3 rounds left. Her gray hair was matted with blood from a head wound, and her left arm hung at an odd angle. She had seen 42 years of warfare across the galaxy, but this felt different. This felt like the end. "Mac, you still breathing over there?" she called out in a rough Russian accent. Marcus Sullivan crouched behind an overturned console 20 feet away. His dark skin was covered in sweat and alien blood. The quiet American had been Elena's partner on this mission, though they had never worked together before today. "Still here," he said in his calm voice. But not for long. The Zephyrians had boarded their ship an hour ago. These reptilian aliens stood 7 feet tall with scales that changed color based on their mood. Right now their scales showed the deep red of victory. They had torn through the human crew like paper. Only Elena and Mac remained alive. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. The aliens were searching room by room, taking their time. They enjoyed the hunt. Elena had faced many enemies in her long career, but the Zephyrians were different. They were cold and efficient killers who saw other species as nothing more than insects to be crushed. "How many left?" Mac asked, checking his own weapon. Elena closed her eyes and listened. She counted at least 8 sets of footsteps, maybe more. Their odds were not good. "Too many," she whispered back. The first Zephyrian appeared in the doorway. Its yellow eyes scanned the room while its forked tongue tasted the air. Elena held her breath and waited. The alien stepped forward, its clawed feet making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. She fired once, twice, 3 times. The first shot hit the alien in the chest, the second in the throat, the third between its eyes. The creature dropped without a sound. But more were coming. Mac moved like liquid shadow around his cover. His knife found the second alien's spine before it could raise its weapon. But even as it fell, 2 more entered the room with energy rifles already firing. The bright blue beams lit up the darkness. Elena rolled behind a fallen support beam while Mac dove in the opposite direction. The aliens' shots burned holes in the walls where they had been standing seconds before. "Give up, humans," one of the Zephyrians called out. Its voice was like grinding stone. "Your species always fights uselessly. You will die either way." Elena looked across the room at Mac. The American's dark eyes met hers, and she saw something there that surprised her. Not fear or desperation, but patience, as if he was waiting for something. She had seen that look before in the eyes of very dangerous men. "Never heard of giving up," Elena called back. She pulled a small device from her belt and smiled grimly. It was her last grenade, but not the kind that exploded with fire and metal. This one would flood the room with sleeping gas in 3 seconds. Mac saw what she was doing and nodded once. He pulled a breathing mask from his jacket and fitted it over his face. Elena did the same. Then she pulled the pin and threw the device toward the aliens. The Zephyrians hissed in alarm as white gas began filling the room. They tried to retreat, but the gas moved faster than they could run. Within seconds, they collapsed to the floor, their weapons clattering beside them. But the victory was short-lived. More footsteps echoed from the corridors. "Many more. We cannot fight them all," Elena said, pulling off her mask as the gas cleared. Max stood up slowly, his hands already raised. "Then we do not fight. We wait." Elena stared at him. In all her years of war, she had never surrendered. But something in his voice made her pause. This man had secrets just like she did. Maybe surrender was not the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The remaining Zephyrians poured into the room with weapons ready. Their leader was a massive alien with silver scales and scars across his snout. Commander Thys, Elena recognized from intelligence reports. He was known throughout the galaxy for his cruelty. "So," Thys said in perfect human language, "the famous Elena Volkov finally falls, and Marcus Sullivan too. 2 legends captured on the same day. The Empire will be pleased." Elena kept her face blank, but inside she was surprised. How did they know their real names? This mission was supposed to be secret. Someone had betrayed them. Mac said nothing. He simply stared at the alien commander with those patient eyes. Thys walked closer, studying them both. "You do not look like legends to me. Just old humans who have lived too long. But perhaps you have information that will be useful before we dispose of you." The soldiers bound their hands with energy shackles that burned against their skin. Elena tested the restraints once and felt the electricity course through her body. These were designed to hold much stronger beings than humans. They were dragged through the corridors of the Zephyrian ship. Elena memorized every turn, every door, every guard post they passed. Old habits from a lifetime of war. Mac walked beside her in silence, but she could tell he was doing the same thing. The detention block was a maze of cells cut into the ship's hull. Most were empty, but a few held other prisoners from different species. All looked broken and hopeless. The Zephyrians did not take prisoners to be kind. They threw Elena and Mac into separate cells 50 feet apart. The force fields hummed to life, trapping them inside boxes of energy and metal. Elena sat on the hard bench and looked around her new prison. The walls were scratched with marks from previous prisoners. Some were words and languages she did not recognize. Others were just lines marking days until death. "Comfortable?" Thais asked, standing outside her cell. Elena said nothing. She had been tortured before by experts. This amateur alien did not worry her. "You will tell us about human military positions," Thais continued. "Fleet movements, weapon capabilities, troop numbers, everything." "Name, rank, serial number," Elena said in a bored voice. "That is all you get." Theis's scales shifted to angry orange. "We shall see. Humans always break eventually. Pain has a way of loosening tongues." He moved to Mac's cell. "And you, Ghost? Will you be more helpful than your friend?" Mac looked up at the alien commander with those calm, patient eyes. "Marcus Sullivan, Major 774998881. The interrogations began the next day. They took Elena first, strapping her to a chair in a white room filled with devices she did not recognize. Thais asked questions while his technicians applied various forms of pain. Electric shocks, sonic torture, drugs that made her skin feel like it was burning. Elena had endured worse. She gave them nothing except her name, rank, and number. They brought her back to her cell after 6 hours. Mac was waiting for his turn. As they passed each other in the corridor, their eyes met for just a moment. Elena saw something that made her heart skip. Mac's pupils were different, larger, as if something inside him was waking up. The days blended together. Torture cell, torture cell. The Zephyrians grew increasingly frustrated with their silence. Elena could hear them arguing in the corridors about what to do with the stubborn humans. On the 7th day, Thais appeared at their cells with a smile that showed too many teeth. "You have been amusing," he said. "But the Empire has no more time for games." "Tomorrow you will be taken to the disposal chambers. Your usefulness has ended." He walked away, his clawed feet clicking on the metal floor. Elena sat in her cell and smiled for the first time since her capture. Finally, she thought. The waiting was almost over. The disposal chamber looked like a metal coffin built for giants. Elena and Mac stood side by side on the platform, their hands still bound with energy shackles. The Zephyrian guards kept their distance, as if the humans might somehow break free and attack them. Commander Thys watched from behind thick protective glass. His silver scales had turned the deep green of satisfaction. After a week of failed interrogations, he was ready to end this annoyance. "Any last words?" Thys asked through the speaker system. Elena looked at the cameras recording everything. Her gray hair hung loose around her scarred face, and her blue eyes held no fear. "Baba Yaga always comes home," she said quietly. Mac turned his head toward her, surprised. Those were not random words. They were a code phrase from the old wars, one that carried meaning few would understand. The Americans smiled for the first time since their capture. "And the Boogeyman never sleeps," he replied in his calm voice. Thys frowned at their strange exchange but waved his hand dismissively. "Activate the chamber." The energy field came to life with a sound like thunder. Blue lightning filled the metal box, striking Elena and Mac again and again. Their bodies shook violently as electricity coursed through them. The guards watched with professional interest while Thys made notes on his tablet. After 30 seconds, the lightning stopped. Elena and Mac lay still on the platform, smoke rising from their clothes. Their eyes were closed and their breathing had stopped. "Scan them," Thys ordered. A Zephyrian technician ran his instruments over the bodies. "No life signs, Commander. Both are dead." "Good. Send them to waste processing. The recyclers will dispose of what remains." 2 maintenance drones lifted the bodies and carried them through a series of corridors deep into the ship. The waste processing center was located in the lower decks where the crew rarely went. It was a place of grinding, machines and chemical baths that broke down organic matter into basic compounds. The drones dumped Elena and Mac onto a conveyor belt that would carry them to the recyclers in 20 minutes. Then they rolled away to continue their programmed duties, leaving the two corpses alone in the mechanical darkness. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Elena's eyes snapped open. She lay perfectly still and listened to the sounds around her. Grinding machines, flowing liquids, the hum of power systems. No footsteps or voices. They were alone. Her body ached in ways she had forgotten were possible. The execution chamber had been designed to kill instantly, but Elena Volkov was not exactly human anymore. Not completely. Years of classified medical procedures had made her something more. Something harder to kill. She turned her head carefully and saw Mac lying beside her. His chest rose and fell in the shallow breathing of someone pretending to be dead. Good. He had survived too. Mac, she whispered. His eyes opened immediately. They were different now, she noticed. The pupils were larger, and the irises seemed to shift color in the dim light. Whatever modifications he carried were becoming active. How long? He asked. Elena checked the timer in her enhanced vision. 15 minutes until the recyclers. We need to move. They sat up slowly, testing their bodies. Elena's cybernetic enhancements were working to repair the damage from the energy field. She could feel her bones knitting back together and her burned skin healing. Mac stretched his arms, and she heard joints pop back into place with wet sounds. The energy shackles had been fried by the execution chamber. They fell away like brittle plastic when Elena pulled at them. She rubbed her wrists and smiled. The Zephyrians had made their first mistake. Mac stood and looked around the waste processing center. It was a maze of pipes and machines that stretched as far as he could see. Where are we on the ship? Elena accessed her memory implants and called up the ship schematic she had memorized during their capture. Lower deck 7. Engineering section is above us. Command deck is 12 levels up. Guards? Minimal down here. Most security is focused on the upper decks. Mac nodded and walked to a nearby maintenance panel. His fingers moved across the alien controls as if he had been trained on Zephyrian systems his entire life. The panel opened to reveal tools and spare parts. Elena watched him work and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. She had heard stories about the American Boogeyman, whispers in the intelligence community about a man who could walk through enemy territory like a ghost. But seeing him in action was different. Mac moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had done impossible things many times before. Got it, Mac said. He pulled out several devices that looked like standard maintenance tools but could be easily modified into weapons. These will do for now. Elena found her own tools in a storage locker. Her enhanced vision could see in the darkness almost as well as daylight, and her improved reflexes made her hands steady as a surgeon's. Within minutes, she had built 3 different types of explosive devices and a weapon that could cut through alien armor. They worked in comfortable silence, 2 professionals preparing for war. Elena had spent 4 decades fighting humanity's enemies across the galaxy. The Martian colony wars, the Proxima Centauri rebellion, operations so classified they did not officially exist. She was Baba Yaga, the witch of Russian folklore who appeared when she was needed most. Mac had his own history written in blood across 3 star systems, the man who had walked into the Tau Ceti Syndicate's fortress alone and left with their entire leadership dead, the shadow that haunted dictators' nightmares. He was the American Boogeyman, and now he was awake. What is the plan? Elena asked as she finished her preparations. Mac looked up at the ceiling, his enhanced hearing tracking the movements of crew members on the decks above. We do what we do best, hunt. The entire ship? Why not? They wanted to kill us. Now they get to live with the consequences. Elena smiled and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had not experienced this feeling in years. The joy of the hunt, the anticipation of revenge. Where do we start? Mac pointed toward a service tunnel that led to the upper decks. Security control room first. We blind them, then we begin. They entered the tunnel system that connected all parts of the ship. Elena's modified body moved silently through the narrow spaces while Mac flowed behind her like liquid shadow. These tunnels were designed for maintenance access, not human-sized infiltrators, but both of them had spent years learning to move through impossible spaces. The security control room was located on Deck 4, surrounded by guards and surveillance systems. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible for 2 prisoners to reach it undetected. But Elena and Mac were not normal prisoners. They were legends, and legends had their own rules. Elena accessed the ship's computer network through a maintenance port. Her cybernetic implants interfaced directly with the alien systems, translating their code into something she could understand. Within seconds, she had mapped every camera, sensor, and alarm on the ship. 12 guards, she whispered to Mac. Motion detectors on all approaches, pressure sensors in the floors. Mac studied the layout she projected into his enhanced vision. Service shaft above the room. We come down from the ceiling. They climbed through the maintenance shafts like spiders in a web. Elena moved first, her body flowing through spaces that should have been too small for human passage. Mac followed close behind, his dark skin helping him blend with the shadows. The guards below were relaxed and confident. Why should they be worried? The dangerous humans were dead and disposed of. The ship was secure and heading back to Empire space. They played cards and told jokes while their instruments monitored empty corridors. Elena dropped through a ceiling panel like a falling spider. Her homemade weapon hummed to life and cut through the first guard's throat before he could make a sound. Mac landed beside her and moved with surgical precision, his modified hands breaking necks and crushing windpipes. In less than 30 seconds, all 12 guards were dead. Elena went to the main control console and plugged her cybernetic interface into the system. Information flowed through her consciousness like a river. Ship schematics, crew locations, communication logs, everything she needed to plan their war. What do you see? Mac asked as he arranged the bodies to look like they were still alive from the corridor cameras. Crew of 400, Elena replied. Most are sleeping. Command staff is on the bridge. Engineering has a skeleton watch. Weaknesses? Elena smiled and her cybernetic eye glowed in the darkness. Many. This ship was built for fighting other ships, not hunting ghosts inside its own hull. Mac finished his work and turned to her. Then let us teach them why humans tell scary stories in the dark. The first body was discovered during the night shift change. Security Officer Vex entered the control room expecting to relieve his colleague and found 12 guards sitting at their posts. They appeared to be watching their monitors normally, but something felt wrong. Vex called out a greeting and received no response. He walked closer and saw that his colleague's eyes were open but empty. When he touched the guard's shoulder, the body toppled forward onto the control panel. His scream echoed through the corridors of the ship. Within minutes, Commander Thess arrived with a full security team. The control room had become a scene of impossible death. All 12 guards had been killed silently and efficiently, their bodies arranged to look alive from the doorway. But that was not the most disturbing part. Written on the wall in the guards' own blood were words in an ancient Earth language. Baba Yaga idot demoy. Below it, in different handwriting, was an English phrase, "The Boogeyman is awake." What does it mean? Dice demanded. The ship's translation computer worked for several minutes before producing an answer. The first message is Russian. It translates to Baba Yaga is coming home. The second is self-explanatory. This felt his scales shift to the yellow of fear before he could control them. Impossible. We watched them die. We scanned their bodies. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. Somehow, the 2 human prisoners had survived and were loose inside his ship. And they were not ordinary humans. Lock down all sections, he ordered. Full security alert. Find them and kill them. Again. The ship's alarms began wailing as blast doors sealed every corridor and bulkhead. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, while automated systems began scanning for human life signs. But Elena and Mac were already ahead of them. Elena crouched in a ventilation shaft above the engineering deck, watching Zephyrian technicians scramble to implement the lockdown protocols. Her cybernetic enhancements allowed her to tap directly into the ship's communication network, listening to their panicked conversations. All sections secure, reported the chief engineer. No signs of human infiltration. Elena smiled and activated the devices she had planted throughout the engineering section, while the crew focused on their security measures. Small charges, barely larger than coins, attached to critical systems. Not enough to destroy the ship, but more than enough to cause very specific problems. The first explosion took out the gravity generators on decks 3 through 7. Surprised Zephyrians suddenly found themselves floating helplessly in zero gravity, while loose objects became dangerous projectiles. Emergency power kicked in, but the backup gravity systems were also compromised. The second explosion disabled the internal communication array. Suddenly, different sections of the ship could not talk to each other. Orders from the bridge never reached their destinations, and reports from the security teams vanished into static. Mac was busy on the crew decks, moving through the maze of sleeping quarters like a shadow given form. The Zephyrians slept in pods that were arranged in long rows, hundreds of them in the darkened chambers. It would have been easy to kill them all, but Mac had different plans. He moved from pod to pod, injecting sleeping crew members with a drug cocktail he had synthesized from medical supplies. Not lethal, but it would cause vivid nightmares and hallucinations for hours. Soon, half the ship's crew would be seeing monsters that were not there while missing the real monsters that were. By morning, the ship was in chaos. Reports came in from every section of strange sightings, equipment failures, and unexplained deaths. Security cameras showed glimpses of figures moving through areas that should have been empty. Sometimes it was a woman with gray hair and glowing cybernetic eyes. Sometimes it was a dark-skinned man who seemed to disappear between one frame and the next. Commander Dice stood on his bridge and tried to maintain control of a situation that was spiraling beyond his understanding. His crew was terrified, his systems were failing, and his prisoners were turning his own ship against him. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we are receiving strange transmissions from the lower decks." "What kind of transmissions?" The officer's scales had turned pale blue with fear. "Audio recordings, sir. They appear to be Earth folklore stories, fairy tales about witches and monsters." Dice listened to one of the recordings and felt something cold crawl up his spine. A woman's voice, speaking in perfect Zephyrian, told the story of Baba Yaga, the witch who lived in a house with chicken legs and ate children who wandered too far into the forest. But this version had been changed. In this telling, Baba Yaga hunted alien soldiers who dared to capture her. Another recording played the legend of the American Boogeyman, the shadow creature that lived in children's closets and under their beds. But again, the story had been altered. This Boogeyman hunted grown warriors who thought themselves safe in their metal ships among the stars. "They are playing psychological warfare," this said, but his voice shook slightly. "Just stories to frighten us." Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, but those seconds of absolute darkness were enough. When vision returned, 3 bridge officers were missing. They were found an hour later in a supply closet, unconscious but alive. Written on their foreheads in permanent marker were symbols from ancient Earth cultures, protective wards against evil spirits. Elena watched the chaos from her hiding place in the ship's central computer core. She had tapped into every system, every camera, every sensor. The Zephyrians were running around like frightened children, jumping at shadows and seeing threats where none existed. But she and Mac were real threats, and they were just getting started. She activated another program she had written, this one designed to manipulate the ship's holographic systems. Throughout the corridors, translucent figures began appearing and disappearing. Sometimes they looked like the 2 human prisoners. Sometimes they looked like creatures from Earth mythology, made real by advanced alien technology. The crew's mental state deteriorated rapidly. Soldiers began firing at hallucinations, damaging their own ship. Officers gave contradictory orders to subordinates who could not tell what was real anymore. Fear spread like a virus through the enclosed environment of the spacecraft. Mac used the confusion to strike at specific targets. The ship's senior staff began disappearing one by one. Not killed, but taken. They would wake up hours later in strange places with no memory of how they got there. Sometimes they found themselves in airlocks with the outer doors unlocked. Sometimes they were in the waste processing center, strapped to the conveyor belts they had used to dispose of human bodies. Each disappearance was accompanied by a message. Words carved into walls, symbols burned into metal surfaces, recordings that played over the ship's speakers, all carrying the same theme. The legends were real and they were angry. Commander Thys found himself alone on his bridge as his officers either disappeared or refused to leave the safety of groups. His silver scales had turned the gray of desperation, and his hands shook as he tried to coordinate his ship's defenses against an enemy he could not see or understand. "This is impossible," he muttered to himself. "They are just humans. Just 2 humans." The lights dimmed, and when they returned to full brightness, Elena stood behind his command chair. She looked exactly as she had when they first captured her, except now her cybernetic eye glowed like a blue star in her scarred face. Her gray hair seemed to move in a wind that did not exist, and her smile showed teeth that looked too sharp. Just two humans? She asked in perfect Zephyrian. Is that what you think we are? This tried to turn around but found his body would not obey him. Some kind of paralysis field held him in place while the human woman circled his chair like a predator studying prey. You know what humans call me? Elena continued. Baba Yaga, the witch who grants wishes. Your wish was to kill me. I am here to show you how that wish came true. She leaned close to his ear and her breath felt like ice against his scales. But first, you will help me send a message to your empire. A message about what happens when you hunt legends. Thais wanted to scream, but no sound came from his throat. Behind Elena, another figure emerged from the shadows. Max Sullivan moved with fluid grace, his dark eyes reflecting light like an animal's. In his hands were instruments Thais did not recognize, but their purpose was clear. The Boogeyman never leaves witnesses, Max said softly, but sometimes he leaves messengers. The last thing Thais remembered before the darkness took him was the sound of Elena's laughter, ancient and cold as the space between stars. Commander Thais woke up strapped to his own command chair. His silver scales had turned the sickly yellow of deep fear, and his throat felt raw as if he had been screaming. The bridge around him was dark except for the glow of emergency lighting and the pulsing displays of damaged systems. Elena stood at his tactical console. Her cybernetic implants interfaced directly with the ship's computer core. Streams of data flowed across the screens as she downloaded everything the Zephyrian Empire knew about human space. Fleet positions, patrol routes, supply lines, classified intelligence reports. All of it was flowing into her enhanced memory banks. Max sat at the communications station, his modified hands moving across alien controls with disturbing familiarity. He had already accessed the ship's long-range transmitters and was preparing to send their message to the galaxy. You cannot do this, Thais whispered. His voice was weak, but anger still burned in his yellow eyes. The Empire will destroy your entire species for this insult. Elena turned to look at him, and he saw something in her expression that made his blood freeze. It was not hatred or rage. It was amusement. She looked at him the way a cat looks at a mouse before playing with it. Your empire believes it understands humans, she said in his own language. You think we are just another weak species that can be conquered and enslaved. You're about to learn how wrong you are. She gestured to the screens around the bridge, which now showed recordings from the ship's internal cameras. Hours of footage documented Elena and Max's campaign of terror through the vessel. Bodies arranged in impossible ways. Messages written in blood. Crew members found in sealed rooms they could not have entered. We are not the humans your empire has been fighting, Elena continued. We are what humans become when you push them too far. We are the monsters your own species tells stories about in the dark. Mac looked up from his console. Transmission ready. Full spectrum broadcast to all Empire channels. Begin recording, Elena ordered. The ship's main camera activated, focusing on the bridge. Commander Thais realized with growing horror that he was about to become the unwilling star of a propaganda message that would be seen across the galaxy. Elena moved to stand directly in front of the camera. In the harsh emergency lighting, with her cybernetic eye glowing and her scarred face set in an expression of cold fury, she looked exactly like the witch from ancient Earth legends. Behind her, Mac remained in shadow, but his presence was felt like a weight pressing down on everything around him. I am Elena Volkov, she began, speaking in the common galactic trade language so her words would be understood by every species. Your empire knows me as Baba Yaga. This is Marcus Sullivan, called the American Boogeyman. You believed you had killed us. You were wrong. The camera panned across the ruined bridge, showing the evidence of their impossible escape and subsequent rampage through the ship. Thais tried to struggle against his restraints, but the energy bonds held him firmly in place. For too long, Elena continued, the Zephyrian Empire has seen humanity as prey. You have raided our colonies, enslaved our people, and murdered our children. You believed we were weak because we valued peace over war. You were wrong about that too. Max stepped into the camera's view, and even Thais felt his breath catch. The American moved with predatory grace, his dark eyes reflecting the emergency lights like mirrors. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but somehow carried more menace than any scream. The Empire's intelligence files contain detailed records of human military capabilities, Max said. They know about our ships, our weapons, our standard tactics, but they know nothing about our legends. Elena smiled, and her cybernetic eye pulsed brighter. Every human culture has stories about monsters that hunt in the darkness. Creatures that appear when evil grows too bold and justice demands payment. Your empire has been very evil for a very long time. The camera zoomed in on her face as she leaned forward. I am the witch from Russian forest who devours those who harm children. Mac is the shadow from American nightmares that punishes the wicked. We are not alone. Behind them, the ship's holographic systems activated again. Throughout the bridge, translucent figures began materializing. Warriors in ancient armor, creatures with claws and fangs, beings of shadow and fire, all of them human legends given digital form by alien technology. Humanity has 1,000 different monsters, Elena said as the holograms moved around her like an army of ghosts. Dragons and demons, vampires and werewolves, spirits of vengeance and death. You thought they were just stories. But stories have power, and power becomes real when it is needed most. Mac activated another program, and the screens around the bridge began showing intelligence reports Elena had stolen from the ship's computers. Fleet deployment schedules, supply convoy routes, the locations of major military bases, all of it was being broadcast to receivers throughout the galaxy. Your military secrets are now public knowledge, Mac announced calmly. Every rebel group, every resistance cell, every species you have oppressed now knows where to strike you. But that is not the worst part. Elena took over the narration again. The worst part is that we are going home. We are going to tell our people what the Empire really is and what it has done. And then we are going to wake up all the other legends. The camera pulled back to show the full bridge. Elena and Mac stood in the center like figures from a nightmare, surrounded by the ghostly holograms of humanity's darkest myths. Behind them, Commander Thys hung his head in defeat, knowing that he had become the messenger of his own empire's doom. To every Zephyrian listening to this broadcast, Elena said, her voice carrying across space to 1,000 worlds. Remember this moment. Remember that you had us in your hands and chose to torture us instead of showing mercy. Remember that you could have made peace with humanity, but you chose war instead. Max stepped forward and his shadow seemed to reach across the entire galaxy. We are coming for you. Not as prisoners or victims, but as legends made real. We are the stories your children will tell about the humans who could not be killed. Elena raised her hand and her cybernetic implants began glowing brighter. Every ship you have lost to sabotage, every base that has suffered mysterious accidents, every officer who has disappeared in the night, that was us preparing for this moment. We have been among you for years, learning your weaknesses, mapping your empire. The holographic monsters around them began moving faster, their forms becoming more solid and menacing. They were no longer just light and shadow, but seemed to have weight and substance. Your empire will fall, Max said with quiet certainty. Not to human fleets or human weapons, but to human nightmares given form and purpose. You will learn to fear the dark again. Elena walked over to Commander Thys and placed her hand on his shoulder. He flinched at her touch but could not pull away from the restraints. But we are not without mercy, she said, looking directly into the camera. Commander Thys will be our gift to you. He will carry our message to your leaders and tell them exactly what he has witnessed. He will be our proof that legends can walk among you undetected until they choose to reveal themselves. She leaned down and whispered something in Thys's ear. His scales turned white with terror and his whole body began shaking. Tell them, Elena said, stepping back. Tell them that Baba Yaga and the American Boogeyman are going home. And tell them that we are bringing friends. Mac began powering down the ship systems one by one. Life support, artificial gravity, propulsion, weapons. All of it going dark except for the minimal systems needed to keep the crew alive until rescue arrived. This ship will drift in space as a monument to your empire's arrogance, Elena announced. Its crew will be found alive but broken, carrying tales of impossible things they witnessed in the darkness. Some will go mad from what they have seen. Others will desert your military rather than face the possibility of encountering us again. She turned back to the camera for her final words. To the humans listening to this broadcast, your legends have awakened. The monsters your ancestors created to frighten children have become real to protect their children's children. The Empire wanted to see what we were capable of when pushed to our limits. Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Now they know. The transmission ended with the image of Elena and Mac standing in the ruined bridge, surrounded by the ghosts of humanity's darkest imagination. Behind them, Commander Thys sat broken in his chair, already composing the report that would terrify an empire. The stolen Zephyrian stealth ship drifted silently through the void between stars. Elena sat in the pilot's chair, her cybernetic eye interfacing with the alien navigation systems as she plotted their course back to human space. Mac worked at the communications console, monitoring Empire frequencies for reactions to their broadcast. Behind them, the massive Zephyrian warship hung dead in space like a broken monument. Its crew huddled in their emergency shelters, waiting for rescue while trying to process what they had witnessed. Many would never fully recover from the experience of being hunted by legends made real. "How many ships are responding to their distress signal?" Elena asked. Mac's enhanced hearing could pick up encrypted transmissions across multiple channels. 17 so far. But they are keeping their distance. None of them want to dock with a ship that Baba Yaga and the Boogeyman just finished with. Elena smiled at that. Fear was humanity's greatest weapon, and they had just demonstrated its power on a galactic scale. The broadcast had gone out on all Empire frequencies, carrying their message to every corner of Zephyrian space. By now, billions of aliens were learning that the humans they had dismissed as weak prey were actually apex predators who had been hiding their true nature. "Any word from command?" Elena asked, referring to the secret human organization that had sent them on their original mission. "Radio silence," Mac replied. "But that is normal. They will want to distance themselves from us officially while celebrating privately." Elena nodded. Their mission had been supposed to be a simple reconnaissance run, to gather intelligence on Empire fleet movements. Instead, it had become something much more significant. They had not just escaped capture, they had declared war on behalf of all humanity. Mac pulled up a holographic display showing the aftermath of their broadcast. Intelligence reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as the message spread beyond Empire space. Human resistance cells were activating on a dozen worlds. Allied species were reconsidering their neutrality. Even some Empire client states were beginning to question their loyalty. "Look at this," Mac said, highlighting a particular report. 3 Zephyrian governors have already requested transfers to posts away from human territory. Their own officers are starting to refuse assignments to patrol human space. Elena felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. This was what she had hoped for when she chose to surrender on that reconnaissance ship. Sometimes the most powerful victory came from apparent defeat. Her cybernetic implants chimed with an incoming message on a heavily encrypted channel. She recognized the source immediately. It was from Captain Sarah Chen of the human stealth cruiser Nightfall. "Elena, Mac, if you are receiving this, the entire human fleet is talking about your broadcast. Command wants you to know that Operation Mythology is now active. All sleeper agents have been awakened. The legends are coming home." Elena exchanged a look with Mac. Operation Mythology had been theoretical until now, a contingency plan that most people hoped would never be needed. But their actions had triggered the activation of humanity's most classified program. All across the galaxy, humans who had been living quiet lives under false identities were receiving coded messages. Scientists, merchants, diplomats, even servants in alien households, all of them specially trained agents who had spent years integrating themselves into alien societies while waiting for the signal to act. They were not ordinary spies. Each one had been selected for their unique skills and enhanced with experimental technology that pushed the boundaries of what humans could become. They were living embodiments of humanity's oldest stories about monsters and magic, but made real through science and determination. "The Dragon of Beijing is activating," Mac reported, reading more intelligence updates. She has been working as a cultural attaché on the Zephyrian capital world for 3 years. Her cover identity gives her access to their central government complex. Elena pulled up the file on Agent Li Wei, codenamed Dragon. The woman appeared to be a harmless academic who studied alien poetry and philosophy. In reality, she was a master of biological warfare who could synthesize deadly toxins from common household chemicals. Her specialty was making deaths look like natural causes or accidents. "The Wolf of Berlin is moving too," Mac continued. "He has been posing as a shipping clerk on a major trade station. His position gives him access to cargo manifests and transportation schedules. Agent Klaus Weber, the Wolf, looked like a middle-aged bureaucrat with soft hands and a receding hairline. But he was actually one of humanity's most accomplished saboteurs. Capable of turning any mechanical system into a weapon, his patience was legendary. He had spent 2 years gaining the trust of his alien co-workers before beginning his real mission. More reports came in as Elena and Mac watched. Humanity's secret army reveal itself. The Phoenix of Cairo emerged from her cover as a medical researcher to begin targeting Zephyrian biological weapons facilities. The Raven of London activated his network of information brokers to start feeding false intelligence to Empire command structures. Each agent had their own specialty, their own territory, their own mythological identity drawn from human cultures across Earth. But they all shared the same purpose: to wage psychological warfare against humanity's enemies by becoming the monsters those enemies feared most. How many are there? Elena asked. Mac continued scrolling through the classified files their broadcast had unlocked. At least 200 confirmed activations so far, probably more that we do not have clearance to know about. Elena felt a sense of pride in her species that she had not experienced in years. Humanity had learned from its long history of war and conflict. They knew that sometimes the best way to fight a superior enemy was to become something that enemy could not understand or predict. The Zephyrian Empire had military superiority in ships and weapons, but they had never learned to fight an enemy that existed as much in their imagination as in physical reality. They could shoot at ships and soldiers, but how do you fight a nightmare? Set course for the Outer Rim territories, Elena ordered. We have work to do. Mac plotted their trajectory toward human space, but not to any official military installation. They were heading for coordinates that did not appear on any star chart. The location of Haven Station, humanity's most secret facility. Haven Station was where legends were born. It was a massive space habitat hidden in the shadow of a brown dwarf star, invisible to conventional sensors and known only to the highest levels of human command. Inside its corridors were training facilities unlike anything found in normal military installations. Here humans learned to become more than human. Elena and Mac were products of Haven Station, graduates of programs so classified that their existence was denied even by people who knew about them. But they were not the only ones. Hundreds of other agents had been trained there over the decades, each one prepared for a specific role in humanity's long-term survival strategy. As their stolen ship approached human space, Elena began receiving more detailed reports from command. The Empire's reaction to their broadcast was even better than she had hoped. Zephyrian forces were pulling back from forward positions, concentrating their fleets around core worlds. Their intelligence services were in chaos as they tried to identify which humans in their territory might be sleeper agents. Most importantly, other alien species were taking notice. The Tau Ceti Syndicate had already sent diplomatic feelers to human space, interested in forming an alliance against their mutual Zephyrian enemy. The Centauri Republic was reconsidering its neutral stance. Even some Empire client states were secretly reaching out to human representatives. They are starting to understand, Mac observed as he read the intelligence reports. Humans are not just another species to be conquered. We are something different, something dangerous. Elena nodded as she guided their ship through the outer marker buoys that protected human space. Ahead of them, the lights of human colonies and space stations sparkled like jewels against the dark. Home had never looked more beautiful, but this was not the end of their mission. It was the beginning. Elena Volkov and Marcus Sullivan had escaped from Zephyrian captivity and delivered their message to the galaxy. Now Baba Yaga and the American Boogeyman were coming home, and they were bringing the full force of humanity's darkest imagination with them. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to see what humans were truly capable of. Soon, they would discover that humanity's greatest strength was not in their technology or their military tactics, it was in their ability to become the very monsters their enemies feared most. The war was just beginning, and the legends were awake.